A powerful desire can live quietly in the mind for years, but desire alone has never built a fortune, led a movement, or changed a life. Something else must happen. At some point, the dream has to be organized, shaped into plans, carried forward with the help of other minds. Because success is rarely the work of one person alone. It grows through decisions, cooperation, and persistence. And beneath it all lies a simple truth. Life tends to reward those who learn how to turn intention into organized action. Desire is where every achievement begins. It arrives quietly at first, sometimes as nothing more than a restless feeling that life could become something more than it is right now. But desire by itself is still only an idea, a spark, a possibility. And history shows again and again that possibilities remain unrealized unless something very specific happens next. The desire must be organized. It must be translated into plans. Then those plans must be brought into action. This is the moment where many dreams quietly fade away. People often imagine that great success comes from inspiration alone, or from talent, or even from luck. But the truth is far less romantic and far more practical. Success begins to take shape only when the imagination stops dreaming long enough to begin designing. Plans must be built. Steps must be chosen. Effort must be directed. Think of desire as the raw material. The imagination is the workshop where that raw material begins to take form. But plans are the tools that shape it into something real. Without plans, desire is like a ship without a rudder. It may drift across the sea for years, carried by changing winds and circumstances, but it never reaches a destination chosen by its captain. Organized planning changes that. It places direction into motion. Yet even here, another truth appears, one that many people resist at first. No individual, no matter how intelligent or talented, possesses enough knowledge, experience, and perspective to build a great fortune or accomplish any major undertaking entirely alone. This idea can be difficult for some to accept. We often admire stories of individual genius, the lone inventor, the brilliant entrepreneur, the determined dreamer who rises above everyone else. But when you look closely at the lives of the people who actually shaped industries, built companies, or created great achievements, another pattern emerges. Behind every great success stands a network of cooperating minds. No individual has enough experience, education, natural ability, and knowledge to ensure the accumulation of a great fortune without the cooperation of other people. This is not a limitation. It is one of the most powerful advantages available to anyone who understands it. Because when two minds come together in harmony, they do something remarkable. They combine knowledge. They multiply imagination. They challenge weaknesses in each other's thinking. And together they can produce ideas that neither mind would have created alone. This principle, often called the mastermind alliance, is one of the most important forces behind organized planning. A mastermind alliance is not simply a group of acquaintances or colleagues. It is a carefully chosen circle of individuals who cooperate with one another in the pursuit of a definite purpose. Each member contributes knowledge, experience, and perspective. Each member strengthens the plan through constructive thinking and honest evaluation. In practical terms, this means surrounding yourself with people who can see what you cannot see. Imagine trying to build something complicated while standing inside the structure itself. Your vision is limited by your position. But when other minds join the process, they observe from different angles. They notice flaws. They suggest improvements. They strengthen the design. The result is something stronger than any individual plan could have been. But cooperation alone is not enough. Harmony must exist within the group. If the members of a mastermind alliance compete with one another, distrust one another, or attempt to dominate the conversation, the alliance collapses. Creativity disappears. Ideas stop flowing. Progress slows. Harmony is the fuel that allows the collective mind to function. That is why anyone building plans for success must choose their collaborators carefully, not only for their intelligence or experience, but for their spirit of cooperation. When harmony exists, the group begins to think almost like a single mind. Ideas flow faster. Solutions appear more easily. Obstacles that once seemed complicated begin to dissolve under the combined effort of multiple perspectives. This principle has quietly shaped nearly every major achievement in business, science, and industry. Consider the story of Thomas Edison. Most people remember Edison as a lone inventor working tirelessly in a laboratory until brilliant ideas appeared, but the reality was far more collaborative. Edison surrounded himself with skilled assistants, engineers, and thinkers who worked together in coordinated effort. They shared ideas, tested theories, improved designs, and challenged each other's assumptions. The incandescent electric light, the invention most often associated with Edison, was not the result of a single experiment or a single moment of brilliance. It was the result of thousands of attempts. Edison himself famously remarked that he had not failed thousands of times, but had instead discovered thousands of ways that would not work. That persistence was possible because the work was organized, collaborative, and constantly refined by multiple minds working toward the same objective. Each failure revealed something new. Each adjustment improved the plan. And eventually, the combination of persistence, experimentation, and organized cooperation produced the breakthrough the world remembers. Henry Ford offers another powerful illustration. Ford did not become one of the most influential industrial figures in history simply because he had a clever idea about automobiles. Many people had ideas about automobiles in the early years of the industry. Some even had better technical education than Ford himself. What Ford possessed was the ability to adopt sound plans and to follow those plans with relentless persistence. The famous Model T was not universally admired in its design. Many advisors urged Ford to change it earlier than he eventually did. Critics pointed out its simplicity, its appearance, and its limitations. Yet Ford understood something deeper about the market. His plan was not simply to build a car. His plan was to build a car that ordinary people could afford. And so he held firmly to the system he had organized: efficient production, standardized parts, and large-scale manufacturing. This plan transformed the automobile from a luxury item into a practical tool for millions of people. But the plan did not emerge fully formed. It evolved through experimentation, adjustment, and cooperation with engineers, designers, and business associates who helped refine the process. Ford's success was not the result of a single decision or a single invention. It was the result of organized planning sustained by persistence. Another example appears in the story of James J. Hill, the railroad builder. Hill's ambition was bold. He sought to build a railroad connecting vast regions of the country. But the financial resources required for such a project were enormous, and the early attempts to raise capital met with resistance and skepticism. Many would have accepted the rejection as final defeat. Hill did not. Instead, he treated the rejection as a signal that his plan required revision. He reorganized his approach. He refined the financial structure of the project. He sought new investors and adjusted his strategy until the conditions were right. Eventually, the railroad was built. Hill's story demonstrates one of the most important lessons about organized planning: the first plan rarely succeeds perfectly. Temporary defeat does not mean the goal itself is impossible. It often means only that the plan must be improved. Unfortunately, many people abandon their ambitions at exactly this point. When the first plan fails, they interpret the failure as proof that the dream itself was unrealistic. But the most successful individuals in history rarely treat failure that way. Instead, they replace the plan. If the new plan fails, they replace that one too. They continue adjusting their approach until the right combination of ideas, resources, and timing appears. This is where persistence becomes inseparable from organized planning. Without persistence, plans are abandoned too early. Without planning, persistence becomes aimless effort. But when the two work together, something powerful happens. A clear goal directs the effort. Organized plans shape the path. And persistence ensures the journey continues even when obstacles appear. And obstacles always appear. Every meaningful undertaking involves moments where the plan does not unfold exactly as expected. Markets change. Resources become scarce. Opportunities close. Unexpected challenges emerge. But these moments are not the end of the story. They are simply part of the process of refining the plan. The majority of people encounter these moments and quietly withdraw. The successful ones respond differently. They pause, study the situation, adjust the plan, and continue forward. This process of adjustment is not a sign of weakness. It is evidence of intelligent planning. Rigid thinking breaks under pressure. Flexible planning adapts and grows stronger. The Mastermind Alliance plays a critical role here. When individuals face obstacles alone, discouragement can grow quickly. Doubt enters the mind. Confidence weakens. But within a cooperative group, setbacks are analyzed collectively. Someone sees a solution another missed. Someone else offers a new perspective. Another member contributes experience from a similar situation. Together, the group rebuilds the plan. This collective intelligence transforms temporary defeat into learning, and learning transforms into improvement. The process continues until the plan becomes strong enough to succeed. Many people imagine that great fortunes appear suddenly, as if success arrived overnight. But when the full story is examined, the truth is almost always different. Behind the visible success lies a long sequence of plans, many of which failed before the final plan succeeded. Behind the final result lies persistence, cooperation, and careful organization of effort. Desire may ignite the journey, but organized planning builds the road, and the road becomes stronger with every revision. This is why harmony among collaborators is so essential. In an environment of conflict, new ideas struggle to survive. People defend their own opinions rather than improving the plan. Criticism becomes destructive rather than constructive. But in an atmosphere of respect and cooperation, ideas evolve freely. Weaknesses are exposed without hostility. Stronger solutions emerge naturally. Harmony transforms collaboration into creative energy. The Mastermind Alliance, when functioning properly, becomes something greater than the sum of its members. Each participant brings knowledge from different experiences. Each participant strengthens the thinking of the others. The group develops plans that no individual could have designed alone. This is the quiet force behind many great enterprises. And it begins with a simple realization. Success is rarely a solitary achievement. It is a coordinated effort. A combination of imagination, planning, cooperation, and persistence. Desire may belong to one individual, but the plan that turns that desire into reality often belongs to many minds working together. And when those minds work in harmony, adjusting plans, learning from failure, and continuing forward, the distance between dream and achievement begins to shrink. What once existed only in the imagination gradually becomes something visible, measurable, and real. A plan, an enterprise, a fortune, or a legacy, all born from a single idea that refused to remain only a desire and instead found its way into organized action. At some point in every organized effort, a quiet distinction begins to appear. It is not announced with titles or ceremonies. It is not always obvious at first, but over time the difference becomes clear. In every group, in every company, in every movement, there are two kinds of roles people eventually settle into. Some become leaders, others become followers. This division is not as dramatic as it sometimes sounds. In fact, most people move between these roles at different moments in life. Someone may lead in one situation and follow in another, but the difference still matters because the responsibilities, the rewards, and the expectations attached to those roles are not the same. The follower contributes effort. The leader carries direction. And direction, when done well, carries a tremendous weight. What is interesting, though, is how most leaders actually begin their journey. Rarely do they step immediately into leadership. Rarely do they arrive already commanding authority or admiration. More often they begin as followers themselves. But not passive followers, intelligent followers. An intelligent follower does something different from the ordinary kind. Instead of simply obeying instructions, they study the process. They observe the decisions being made. They learn from the successes and the mistakes of those who lead. And gradually, almost without noticing, they begin to develop the qualities that leadership requires. History quietly confirms this pattern again and again. Look closely at the lives of individuals who eventually guided industries, organizations, or entire movements. In their early years, many of them spent long periods working under someone else's direction. They listened. They absorbed knowledge. They learned how systems functioned. They learned what worked and what failed. This period of intelligent followership is often the true training ground for leadership. Because leadership is not simply about standing at the front of a group and issuing commands. It is about understanding people. It is about carrying responsibility for outcomes. It is about guiding effort toward a definite purpose. And those abilities rarely develop without experience. The person who cannot follow a leader intelligently usually struggles when placed in leadership themselves. They have never learned the rhythm of cooperation. They have never observed how direction flows through an organization. But the individual who understands how to follow thoughtfully often rises more quickly into leadership than anyone expects. They understand the structure from the inside. They understand the effort required to carry out instructions. And perhaps most importantly, they understand how people respond to guidance. Because leadership is not sustained by authority alone. It is sustained by trust. The leader who inspires trust becomes someone people willingly follow. The leader who destroys trust eventually stands alone. This difference brings us to one of the most fascinating contrasts in human organization: the difference between leadership by consent and leadership by force. Leadership by force appears powerful at first. It relies on authority, pressure, fear, or rigid control. The leader demands obedience. Orders are followed because consequences exist for disobedience. For a short time, this kind of leadership may seem effective. Tasks are completed. Instructions are carried out. Movement occurs. But something essential is missing. People are not giving their best energy. They are complying, not cooperating. History offers countless examples of leaders who relied heavily on force. Dictators, kings, or authoritarian figures often ruled through command rather than persuasion. Their authority appeared strong while circumstances supported them. But eventually the structure weakened. Because people rarely give their loyalty to fear. They tolerate it for a time. They endure it when necessary. But the moment an opportunity appears to escape its control, the structure begins to collapse. Leadership by consent works very differently. Here, the leader does not rely primarily on fear or pressure. Instead, the leader builds confidence. People follow because they believe in the direction being offered. They trust the judgment of the person guiding them. They feel respected. They see fairness in decisions. And because of that, their cooperation becomes voluntary. Voluntary cooperation is one of the most powerful forces in human activity. When people choose to follow rather than being forced to follow, their effort changes completely. They contribute ideas. They take initiative. They protect the success of the group because they feel connected to it. This is the kind of leadership that endures, and it is built on a series of personal qualities that shape how the leader behaves. One of the first of these qualities is courage. Not the dramatic courage often celebrated in stories of battle or heroism, but the quieter courage that appears in everyday decisions. The courage to stand by a plan when others doubt it. The courage to take responsibility when circumstances become difficult. The courage to admit mistakes and correct them. Followers rarely trust a leader who lacks confidence in themselves. If the person giving direction hesitates constantly or appears uncertain of their own decisions, those around them begin to lose faith in the path being taken. Confidence creates stability, and stability creates trust. But courage alone is not enough. It must be balanced by self-control. Leadership exposes individuals to pressure, criticism, unexpected problems, and sometimes intense opposition. In these moments, emotional reactions can easily overpower judgment. A leader who cannot control their temper, their impulses, or their frustration quickly undermines their own authority. People observe behavior closely. When a leader remains calm in the middle of chaos, others feel steadier. When the leader reacts impulsively, anxiety spreads through the entire group. Self-control, therefore, becomes a silent example that followers often imitate. Then there is the question of fairness. No organization can function long if people believe that decisions are made unjustly. When rewards are distributed unfairly, resentment grows. When responsibilities are assigned without balance, morale weakens. But when a leader demonstrates a consistent sense of justice, when decisions reflect fairness and respect, something remarkable happens. People accept even difficult decisions. They may not always agree, but they trust the intention behind the choice. Fairness protects the integrity of leadership. Closely related to fairness is the ability to make definite decisions. Indecision creates confusion. It delays progress. It signals uncertainty to everyone involved. The leader who constantly wavers forces others to hesitate as well. But the leader who studies a situation carefully weighs the available information and then decides with clarity, provides direction that people can act upon. Even when adjustments later become necessary, the presence of clear decisions keeps the organization moving forward. Planning is another central trait. A leader cannot rely on guesswork. They must think ahead. They must organize tasks, anticipate obstacles, and arrange resources in ways that support the goal being pursued. Without definite plans, leadership becomes little more than reaction. The group moves from problem to problem, improvising constantly without long-term direction. But when a leader designs thoughtful plans and coordinates the efforts of others around them, progress becomes systematic. The group advances with purpose rather than drifting with circumstance. Yet, planning brings another responsibility that many overlook. A leader must also be willing to serve. This idea surprises some people because leadership is often associated with privilege or authority. But in practice, leadership carries additional obligations rather than fewer. The leader frequently works longer hours. The leader addresses problems others cannot resolve. The leader must sometimes accept burdens that followers never see. There are moments when the leader must perform tasks they could easily delegate simply because the situation requires example rather than instruction. True leadership, therefore, includes humility, not the absence of confidence, but the recognition that success belongs to the entire group rather than to one individual alone. Closely tied to this humility is personality. Not superficial charm or exaggerated charisma, but a manner that encourages respect and cooperation. People naturally gravitate toward leaders whose presence inspires confidence and goodwill. A pleasant personality reduces friction. It makes communication easier. It encourages collaboration. But personality alone cannot sustain leadership without understanding. A leader must be able to sympathize with the people working alongside them. This does not mean abandoning discipline or lowering standards. It means recognizing that each individual carries concerns, ambitions, and challenges of their own. When a leader understands these realities, they can guide people more effectively. They can motivate effort without unnecessary pressure. They can support growth rather than simply demanding results. This understanding strengthens loyalty. And loyalty becomes one of the most valuable resources any leader possesses. Responsibility also rests heavily on the shoulders of leadership. When mistakes occur, the leader cannot simply shift blame downward. The leader must accept accountability for the results produced by the group. If a follower fails, the leader examines whether guidance training or support was insufficient. This willingness to assume responsibility protects the dignity of those working within the organization. It also reinforces the credibility of leadership. Finally, cooperation forms the foundation upon which all these qualities rest. A leader cannot accomplish great things alone. They must encourage others to work together toward a shared objective. This requires communication, patience, and the ability to align different personalities and talents into a coordinated effort. When cooperation thrives, productivity multiplies. People support one another. Ideas circulate freely. Momentum grows. But when cooperation breaks down, even the most talented individuals struggle to produce results. Leadership, therefore, becomes the art of harmonizing effort. It brings together courage, discipline, fairness, planning, humility, personality, understanding, responsibility, and cooperation into a single guiding influence. When these qualities exist, followers willingly contribute their energy. They trust the direction being offered. They feel part of a purposeful effort rather than merely participants in a task. And from that atmosphere, strong organizations are built. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of leadership is how quietly it develops. It rarely begins with a title. It begins with observation, with learning, with the intelligent follower who pays attention while others simply comply. That follower notices how decisions shape outcomes. They notice how fairness strengthens loyalty. They notice how calm leadership stabilizes uncertainty. And over time, they begin practicing those same qualities. When the moment arrives for them to lead, the transition feels natural. Because leadership was never something suddenly acquired. It was something gradually understood. And once understood, it becomes one of the most powerful forces any group can experience. A force not built on command alone, but on trust, cooperation, and shared purpose. That is the kind of leadership that moves people forward. And it is the kind that endures long after titles and authority have faded away. Leadership often appears impressive from a distance. When people watch someone guiding a company, directing an organization, or shaping the decisions of many others, it can seem almost effortless. But the truth behind leadership is far more fragile than it looks. Leadership is not something that exists permanently once it has been achieved. It is something that must be maintained, protected, and continually earned. And the surprising thing is that leadership rarely collapses because of a single dramatic mistake. More often, it erodes slowly through habits that weaken trust and cooperation. Certain patterns appear again and again in the stories of leaders who fail. They begin almost invisibly, and at first they may seem harmless. But over time they accumulate until the structure of leadership begins to crack. One of the most common weaknesses is the inability to organize details. At first glance, this might sound like a small problem. After all, leadership is often associated with vision, big ideas, and strategic thinking. But vision alone is not enough to guide a complex effort. Someone must translate ideas into action. Tasks must be coordinated. Information must move smoothly from one part of the organization to another. A leader who loses control of details quickly finds themselves overwhelmed. Confusion begins to spread through the group. Deadlines slip, responsibilities become unclear, and eventually people begin to feel that the direction they are receiving is no longer reliable. The most effective leaders understand something important about details. They do not attempt to perform every task themselves, but they make sure that every detail is accounted for. They organize responsibilities carefully and delegate them to capable individuals. In this way, the leader maintains oversight without becoming trapped in the small mechanics of every operation. But when this ability disappears, leadership begins to weaken. Another danger emerges when a leader becomes unwilling to perform humble service. This idea often surprises people because leadership is sometimes imagined as a position of privilege. Yet the most respected leaders are often those who demonstrate a willingness to work alongside the people they guide. They do not ask others to perform tasks they themselves would refuse. When circumstances require extra effort, they step forward rather than retreat behind authority. This behavior sends a powerful message. It tells followers that leadership is not about escaping responsibility. It is about accepting more of it. But when leaders begin to believe that certain tasks are beneath them, something changes. Distance grows between them and the people who must carry out the work. Respect fades quietly, and without respect, authority loses much of its strength. A more subtle weakness appears when leaders begin expecting reward primarily for what they know, rather than for what they accomplish. Knowledge is valuable, of course. Education, experience, and expertise form the foundation of many careers. But in leadership, knowledge must eventually transform into results. Organizations do not succeed because leaders possess information. They succeed because that information is applied. A leader who believes their position alone entitles them to recognition or reward often begins to lose the urgency that once drove their performance. Decisions slow down. Initiative fades. Meanwhile, others in the organization continue working hard to produce results. Eventually, the imbalance becomes visible. Leadership then begins to appear hollow rather than effective. Perhaps one of the most destructive tendencies appears when leaders begin fearing competition from those around them. This fear can be surprisingly common. When someone reaches a position of influence, it may seem natural to guard that position carefully. The leader may worry that a talented follower could eventually replace them. Instead of encouraging strong people to grow, the leader begins to restrict opportunities. Capable individuals are kept at a distance. Responsibilities are withheld. Ideas are ignored. But this defensive behavior creates the very danger the leader fears. When talented individuals feel restricted, they either leave or disengage. Innovation slows. Progress becomes limited by the leader's own abilities. Strong leadership works differently. Confident leaders surround themselves with capable people. They develop successors. They encourage initiative. By multiplying talent rather than suppressing it, they expand the strength of the entire organization. Ironically, This approach often makes their own position more secure rather than less. Another weakness emerges when imagination disappears. Leadership frequently involves navigating uncertain situations. Markets shift. Technologies change. Unexpected problems arise. In these moments, imagination becomes a vital tool. A leader must be able to visualize solutions that do not yet exist. They must be able to design plans that move beyond familiar patterns. Without imagination, leadership becomes reactive instead of creative. The leader responds only after events have already unfolded. Organizations guided in this way slowly fall behind more innovative competitors. And once momentum is lost, rebuilding it becomes difficult. Selfishness also undermines leadership in ways that are both visible and invisible. When leaders take credit for the achievements of their followers, resentment grows quickly. People naturally desire recognition for their efforts. If that recognition is consistently diverted towards someone else, enthusiasm fades. But the opposite behavior produces powerful results. When leaders openly acknowledge the contributions of their teams, something remarkable happens. People become eager to contribute even more. They take pride in their work. They feel part of a shared success. The leader who shares credit multiplies loyalty. The leader who hoards credit slowly isolates themselves. Another threat to leadership comes through excess, what earlier generations called intemperance. This does not refer only to alcohol or visible indulgence. It refers to any habit that weakens judgment, discipline, or reliability. Followers watch their leaders closely. If they observe behavior that suggests lack of control or declining focus, confidence begins to erode. Leadership depends heavily on perception. Once people begin to doubt the discipline of their leader, the authority behind that leadership weakens as well. Disloyalty creates an even deeper fracture. A leader must remain loyal to the trust placed in them and to the people who rely on their guidance. When leaders betray that trust, whether through broken commitments, shifting allegiances, or disregard for those they lead, the damage spreads quickly. Trust is extremely difficult to rebuild once it has been lost. For this reason, loyalty remains one of the most essential elements of enduring leadership. Yet another failure emerges when leaders rely too heavily on authority itself. Some leaders attempt to reinforce their position by constantly emphasizing their rank. They remind others of their power. They issue commands designed to demonstrate control. But authority advertised too loudly often reveals insecurity rather than strength. True leadership rarely needs to declare itself. People recognize it through behavior, through fairness, competence, and the ability to guide others towards successful outcomes. When authority must constantly be asserted, it usually means the deeper foundations of leadership are weakening. A similar pattern appears when leaders become overly attached to titles. Titles may indicate responsibility, but they do not create respect. Respect grows from consistent action, good judgment, fairness, reliability, and the ability to inspire cooperation. The leader who depends primarily on their title often discovers that titles alone cannot sustain influence for very long. Gradually, people begin responding to the position rather than to the person. And when that happens, leadership becomes mechanical rather than meaningful. Each of these weaknesses may appear small when viewed individually, but together they reveal a larger truth. Leadership is not preserved automatically. It requires continuous attention to character, discipline, and the needs of those being guided. When those qualities weaken, leadership fades, sometimes slowly, sometimes suddenly. Yet moments of leadership failure often create something unexpected. They create opportunity. Periods of change, especially those following economic hardship or social upheaval, tend to expose weaknesses in existing leadership structures. Old methods no longer function as effectively as they once did. Institutions that seemed stable begin struggling to adapt. During these moments, new leaders become necessary. History has shown that entire fields periodically enter phases where leadership must be renewed. Politics is often one of the first areas where this need appears. Public frustration grows when existing leaders appear disconnected from the needs of the people they represent. Systems that once functioned smoothly become tangled in inefficiency or mistrust. At these moments, societies begin searching for individuals capable of restoring confidence and direction. banking and finance also experience cycles where leadership must evolve. Public trust plays an enormous role in financial systems. When that trust weakens, whether through economic crises, mismanagement, or changing expectations, the institutions themselves must adapt. New leadership becomes necessary to rebuild credibility and introduce more responsible practices. Industry presents another arena where leadership must continually renew itself. In earlier periods, many industrial leaders focused primarily on profits and dividends. Their decisions were often guided by financial calculations alone. But as societies evolve, expectations change. The modern industrial leader must think not only about profits, but also about the broader impact of decisions on workers' communities and society itself. Leadership becomes less about extraction and more about stewardship. The leader of the future must recognize that the organizations they guide influence the lives of thousands of people. Managing those organizations responsibly becomes part of their duty. Education also enters periods where leadership must change direction. For many years, educational systems emphasized the transmission of knowledge alone. Students absorbed information, but often struggled to apply it in practical situations. New leadership in education must focus not only on knowledge, but on the ability to translate knowledge into action. Teaching people how to think, how to solve problems, and how to adapt becomes more important than memorizing information. This transformation requires educators who can rethink long-established traditions. Journalism and public communication face similar transitions. Information shapes public understanding, and therefore the leaders within journalism carry enormous influence. Periods of social change often expose weaknesses in how information is delivered. Sensationalism propaganda or biased reporting can damage public trust. New leadership in journalism must restore credibility by emphasizing accuracy, responsibility, and service to the public. Even religion encounters moments when leadership must evolve. Spiritual leadership has traditionally focused on guiding people through moral and philosophical questions. But changing social conditions sometimes require religious leaders to engage more directly with practical challenges affecting everyday life. Economic hardship, social conflict, and community needs may require guidance that extends beyond purely theological concerns. Leaders who understand these realities become important bridges between tradition and modern life. Across all these fields, politics, finance, industry, education, journalism, and religion, the pattern remains consistent. Times of change expose weaknesses in existing leadership, and those weaknesses create openings for new leaders to emerge. But the leaders who succeed in these moments rarely rely on force. The world gradually moves away from systems built on coercion and towards systems built on cooperation. People expect to be heard. They expect fairness. They expect leadership that respects their contributions. This shift does not eliminate authority, but it reshapes how authority functions. The leader of the future becomes less a commander and more a coordinator of effort. Instead of demanding obedience, they cultivate participation. Instead of ruling through pressure, they guide through cooperation. And those who develop this style of leadership discover that opportunities appear in unexpected places. Every moment of transition in society opens doors for individuals willing to step forward with integrity, imagination, and a spirit of collaboration. The failures of yesterday's leadership become the training ground for tomorrow's leaders. Those who understand the weaknesses that destroy leadership and who avoid repeating them find themselves prepared for the responsibilities ahead. And when the moment arrives for new leadership to emerge, they are ready to guide others not by force, but by example. If you look closely at the beginnings of most great fortunes, a surprising pattern appears. Many people imagine that wealth begins with property inheritance or large sums of money already in hand. But in reality, most fortunes start in a much simpler way. They begin with something almost everyone possesses: personal services or ideas. Think about that for a moment. Before companies are built, before investments multiply, before industries grow, someone is offering something of value. Sometimes it is knowledge. Sometimes it is skill. Sometimes it is a creative idea that solves a problem others have overlooked. Whatever form it takes, the starting point is almost always the same: a person exchanging their ability to serve for an opportunity to grow. That exchange is the quiet foundation beneath countless success stories. It means that the individual who does not yet possess money still possesses something valuable to offer. And in many cases, that value, if presented intelligently, can grow into opportunity far beyond what the individual first imagined. But here is where many people make a critical mistake. They assume that simply having ability is enough. They believe that if their talents are strong, the world will automatically recognize them. Opportunities will appear. Employers will notice. Success will unfold naturally. Unfortunately, that is not how the world usually works. Ability alone is rarely enough. Ability must be presented. It must be organized, explained, and positioned in a way that allows others to recognize its value. In other words, personal services must be marketed just as carefully as any product in a marketplace. This idea may feel uncomfortable at first. Many people prefer to think of themselves as workers rather than salespeople. They see selling as something merchants do, not something individuals must apply to their own careers. Yet in reality, every person who earns their living through work is engaged in a form of selling. They are offering their knowledge, their time, their creativity, their effort. And the success of that exchange depends heavily on how clearly those abilities are presented to others. Imagine a merchant placing a valuable product on a shelf, but never describing it, never explaining its usefulness, never drawing attention to it. The product might be excellent, but customers would pass by without noticing it. The same thing happens when individuals fail to present their abilities thoughtfully. The world cannot recognize value that has not been clearly demonstrated. This is why intelligent preparation becomes so important. Before approaching an employer, a business partner, or any opportunity, successful individuals take time to prepare themselves carefully. They study the field they hope to enter. They learn about the organization they wish to join. They consider how their own abilities might solve specific problems. This kind of preparation transforms an ordinary job search into something much more powerful. Instead of simply asking for work, the individual begins presenting value. They show how their knowledge, skills, and ideas can contribute to the success of the organization. And when that presentation is done thoughtfully, it immediately distinguishes them from the majority of applicants who approach opportunities with little preparation. Research plays a crucial role in this process. Imagine two people seeking the same position. The first approaches the employer with only a general desire for work. They know little about the organization beyond its name. Their request is vague, their qualifications loosely described. The second approaches differently. They have studied the company's operations. They understand its goals, its challenges, and its direction. They can speak intelligently about the industry and the opportunities ahead. When these two individuals sit down with the same employer, the difference becomes obvious almost immediately. One appears uncertain, the other appears prepared. Preparation signals seriousness. It demonstrates that the individual values the opportunity enough to understand it deeply. But preparation alone still leaves something incomplete. The individual must also communicate their abilities in a clear and organized way. One powerful method described in the original philosophy involves creating a written brief, a carefully prepared summary of qualifications, experience, and abilities. Think of this brief almost like a case presented before a judge. Every important detail is arranged thoughtfully. Education is explained clearly. Past experience is described honestly. References are included to demonstrate reliability. Even a photograph may appear, offering the employer a more complete impression of the person behind the document. At first glance, this may seem excessive, but remember that employers face a difficult challenge of their own. They must choose among many applicants, each claiming to be capable. They must decide who will become a valuable part of their organization. The individual who prepares a clear professional presentation of their abilities makes that decision easier. They show the employer exactly what they offer. They demonstrate attention to detail. They signal seriousness and professionalism before the conversation even begins. Sometimes such preparation has been known to secure employment without a personal interview at all. That is the power of thoughtful presentation. Another interesting approach sometimes suggested is offering to demonstrate ability through a trial period. Imagine approaching a position with the confidence to say, "Allow me to prove my value." Let me work for a short period so you may judge my contribution yourself. Such an offer communicates something powerful. It shows confidence. It shows determination. It shows belief in one's ability to deliver results. And when the individual truly possesses the skills, they claim that trial period often becomes the beginning of long-term opportunity. But even beyond individual preparation, something larger has been changing in the relationship between employers and employees. In earlier eras, the relationship often resembled a simple exchange. Employers paid wages. Employees provided labor. The two sides bargained with one another, sometimes with tension or suspicion. But over time, economic realities began to shift. Businesses discovered that success depended not only on internal efficiency, but also on how well they served the public. Employees realized that their own security depended on the health of the organizations they worked for. Gradually, a new understanding began to take shape. Employers and employees were not opposing sides after all. They were partners in service to the same third party, the public. Without the public, no business could survive. No wages could be paid. No organization could continue. This realization changed the nature of work itself. Instead of bargaining against one another, employers and employees began to see themselves as collaborators, working toward a shared purpose, providing value to the people they served. When this perspective takes hold, the atmosphere within organizations changes dramatically. The employee who understands this principle no longer focuses solely on performing assigned tasks. They begin asking a deeper question. How can I contribute more value? How can I improve the experience of the people this organization serves? How can I strengthen the success of the whole enterprise? This mindset transforms ordinary work into something far more powerful. Because individuals who focus on increasing value rarely remain ordinary employees for long. Their initiative becomes visible. Their contributions become essential. Their opportunities expand naturally. Within this philosophy, 3 guiding principles help define the most effective way to market personal services. These principles are often summarized in a simple formula: quality, quantity, and spirit of service. Think of quality first. Quality means performing work with care and efficiency. It means completing every task as well as it can reasonably be done. It reflects pride in craftsmanship regardless of the type of work involved. A person who consistently delivers high-quality service builds a reputation that travels ahead of them. People begin trusting their work, and trust is one of the most valuable forms of currency in any profession. Next comes quantity. Quantity does not simply mean working longer hours. It refers to the habit of contributing as much useful service as one is capable of delivering. It means developing skills over time so that the amount of value produced increases with experience. The individual who continually expands their capacity becomes more valuable to every organization they join. Finally comes the spirit in which service is delivered. This third principle may seem intangible, but it often determines whether success arrives quickly or slowly. 2 people may perform the same tasks with equal skill and equal effort, yet one creates a positive atmosphere around them, while the other spreads tension or negativity. The difference lies in attitude. The spirit of service means cooperating with others. It means maintaining harmony within the workplace. It means approaching responsibilities with goodwill rather than resentment. When this spirit exists, teamwork flourishes. People naturally support one another. Problems are solved more easily. Productivity rises almost without effort. Employers recognize this difference quickly. They understand that technical ability alone cannot sustain long-term success within an organization. Cooperation, attitude, and reliability often matter just as much. And so the individuals who combine quality, quantity, and spirit of service often advance more rapidly than those who rely on skill alone. Their value becomes visible across the entire organization. Another important realization follows from this philosophy. Every individual who earns a living through personal services is, in effect, operating a small enterprise of their own. They are responsible for managing their abilities, improving their skills, and presenting their value to the marketplace. In this sense, each person becomes both the product and the marketer. Understanding this changes how people approach their careers. Instead of passively waiting for opportunity, they begin designing it. They identify organizations they admire. They study how those organizations operate. They consider what ideas or improvements they could contribute. Then they present those ideas clearly and confidently. Sometimes the position they seek may not even exist yet. But when someone demonstrates enough value, organizations often create space for them. Because every successful enterprise depends on individuals capable of improving its performance. This approach requires more effort than simply sending applications and waiting for responses. But it often produces far greater rewards. Careful planning, thoughtful presentation, and genuine commitment to service can shorten the distance between ambition and opportunity. And when individuals adopt this mindset consistently, they discover something remarkable. Their careers stop feeling like a search for employment. Instead, they become a continuous process of creating value. Ideas become opportunities. Opportunities become partnerships. And partnerships, when guided by quality, quantity, and spirit of service, often become the foundation of lasting success. This is how many fortunes begin. Not with money already accumulated, but with an individual who understands how to present their abilities intelligently, serve others effectively, and grow steadily through cooperation with the organizations and communities they help to strengthen. From that simple beginning, possibilities expand further than most people ever expect. There is a quiet principle that runs beneath nearly every economic system, every business transaction, and every attempt to accumulate wealth. It is not always discussed openly, yet it influences outcomes with remarkable consistency. People may argue about policies, ideologies, and financial strategies, but sooner or later they encounter the same underlying reality. Wealth cannot be created by taking without giving something of equal or greater value in return. This idea sounds simple, almost obvious. Yet history repeatedly shows that entire societies forget it from time to time. Individuals forget it. Groups forget it. Even institutions sometimes behave as though value can be taken indefinitely without being earned. For a short while, this illusion may seem to work. Gains may appear quickly. Resources may flow toward those who demand them most aggressively. But eventually, the balance shifts. The law of economics begins to assert itself. It is not a law passed by legislatures or enforced by courts. It operates more quietly than that. It functions through cause and effect. When service decreases and demands increase, systems begin to strain. When value delivered to others falls below the value taken from them, confidence weakens. And when confidence disappears, economic structures begin to crack. The law of economics does not punish people out of moral judgment. It simply responds to imbalance. If a farmer plants thistle seeds, the harvest will not produce wheat. The outcome follows the cause with complete indifference to the farmer's wishes. Economic life works in much the same way. Service is the seed. Reward is the harvest. Whenever people attempt to reverse that relationship, seeking reward without service, the imbalance eventually becomes visible. Periods of economic hardship often reflect this forgotten truth. When industries, workers, and institutions begin competing primarily for advantage over one another, instead of cooperating to create value for the public, the entire structure weakens. Prices rise without improvement in quality. Efficiency declines. Trust erodes. And gradually, the system becomes unstable. The original script illustrated this idea through several examples drawn from everyday life. There was a time when certain industries operated with little concern for service to the customer. In some railroads, passengers who asked simple questions about schedules were directed rudely toward bulletin boards instead of receiving assistance. Conductors sometimes argued openly with travelers. Employees behaved as though customers were inconveniences, rather than the very reason the business existed. For a while, these habits seemed normal, but change eventually arrived. Competition emerged from unexpected directions. New forms of transportation appeared. Bus lines began replacing streetcars in many areas. Drivers offered courteous service. They stopped for passengers more willingly. The difference in attitude was noticeable, and passengers responded. The public moved toward the businesses that treated them with respect. Suddenly, the industries that had once taken customers for granted found themselves struggling to survive. It was not the result of punishment or revenge. It was simply the law of economics expressing itself. The organizations that served people well prospered. The ones that neglected service declined. Another illustration appeared in the banking world. There was a period when many banks projected an air of formality and distance. Customers approaching a banker often felt intimidated before the conversation even began. Borrowers sometimes experienced the interaction as cold or dismissive. But economic realities changed that environment. Financial crises forced institutions to reconsider how they related to the public. The atmosphere of banking gradually shifted. Bank officials became more accessible. Offices opened physically and psychologically to the people they served. Courtesy replaced aloofness. Understanding replaced rigid formality. The change was not merely cosmetic. It reflected a deeper recognition that institutions survive only when they maintain the confidence of the public. Without that confidence, no amount of financial expertise can sustain long-term success. Retail businesses experienced a similar transformation. In earlier years, it was common for customers to wait patiently while store owners finished personal conversations or completed their own tasks before offering assistance. Service sometimes appeared as an afterthought, but over time, new competitors introduced a different philosophy. Large retail chains organized their operations around customer service. Clerks assisted shoppers promptly. Stores focused on efficiency, presentation, and attentiveness. Customers naturally gravitated toward the businesses that respected their time and needs. Again, the pattern repeated itself. The law of economics rewarded those who delivered better service. Those who ignored the change lost ground. These examples reveal something important. Economic systems are not sustained merely by money or infrastructure. They are sustained by relationships built on value and trust. Every exchange between buyer and seller, employer and employee, business and public rests on the same foundation: mutual benefit. When that balance is preserved, prosperity grows naturally. When it is ignored, instability eventually appears. Understanding this principle also helps explain the role of organized capital in modern civilization. The term capital is often misunderstood. Many people hear the word and think only of money or wealth concentrated in financial centers. But capital represents something much larger. Capital is organized effort. It is the coordinated use of resources, knowledge, and human skill to create systems that serve millions of people simultaneously. Consider something as simple as a breakfast in a large city. A glass of grapefruit juice, perhaps. A few slices of bread, eggs, butter, fruit, and tea. Each item appears ordinary on the table. Yet behind that simple meal lies an astonishing network of cooperation. The grapefruit may have been grown in Florida. The wheat for the bread perhaps harvested in Kansas. The tea imported from across oceans. Sugar refined from distant fields. Bananas shipped from tropical regions thousands of miles away. Each ingredient travels through layers of production, transportation, storage, and distribution before reaching a single breakfast table. Ships must cross oceans. Railroads and trucks must carry cargo across continents. Warehouses must preserve freshness. Markets must coordinate supply and demand. All of this happens because organized capital provides the machinery, infrastructure, and systems required to move goods efficiently across enormous distances. Behind the physical systems stand millions of workers, engineers, planners, and managers cooperating in ways few people ever pause to consider. Without that coordination, even the simplest conveniences of modern life would become extraordinarily difficult to obtain. Imagine attempting to gather those same breakfast ingredients alone. To collect tea, you might have to travel to China or India. Sugar might require a journey to Cuba or distant agricultural regions. Bananas could involve another long voyage across oceans. Wheat would demand a trip to the great farming plains. Transporting all of those items personally, refining them, packaging them, and delivering them back to a single city apartment would be nearly impossible for one individual. Yet organized capital performs this task daily for millions of households. This is not magic. It is organization. It is the coordination of human knowledge and effort guided by economic incentives. People invest resources to build railroads, factories, ships, and farms because they expect reward in return. Their efforts produce value for the public while also generating profit for themselves. The law of economics ensures that both sides of this exchange remain connected. When service improves, prosperity expands. When service deteriorates, decline follows. Periods of economic crisis often illustrate this relationship dramatically. During times of hardship, societies sometimes witness widespread attempts to obtain wealth without delivering corresponding value. Groups may demand benefits without increasing productivity. Businesses may attempt to raise profits without improving service. For a time, these strategies may seem successful, but eventually, the imbalance becomes visible in the form of unemployment, declining industries, and shrinking opportunities. The cause is not mysterious. It is the natural outcome of ignoring the fundamental relationship between contribution and reward. Economic systems respond to value creation. They reward individuals and organizations that deliver good services or ideas that others genuinely need. And they gradually withdraw support from those who attempt to extract benefits without providing equivalent service. This principle applies not only to large industries, but also to individuals seeking personal success. Anyone hoping to accumulate wealth must eventually face the same equation. What value are you creating for others? What problems are you solving? What service are you delivering that improves the lives of people around you? The answers to those questions determine economic reward far more reliably than ambition alone. Ambition without service leads to frustration. Service combined with organization leads to opportunity. This understanding transforms the way people approach prosperity. Instead of focusing primarily on what they want to receive, they begin focusing on what they can contribute. Instead of competing to extract value, they compete to create it. And when enough individuals adopt that perspective, entire economies begin to flourish. The relationship between service and reward becomes visible everywhere. Businesses that innovate and improve customer experiences expand rapidly. Workers who develop valuable skills find increasing opportunities. Entrepreneurs who organize resources efficiently create industries that employ thousands. Prosperity spreads outward from these contributions. The broader lesson behind these examples is remarkably consistent. Civilization itself depends on organized effort directed toward useful service. Scientists discover new knowledge. Engineers design technologies that apply that knowledge. Educators share it with future generations. Business leaders organize production and distribution systems. Workers apply skill and labor to transform raw materials into valuable products. Each role contributes to the larger structure. When these efforts align toward serving the needs of society, progress accelerates. Cities grow. Standards of living rise. Opportunities expand. But when cooperation breaks down, when individuals attempt to gain without giving, the system begins to weaken. The law of economics does not tolerate imbalance indefinitely. Eventually, the accounting must be reconciled. This is why sustainable prosperity always grows from contribution rather than exploitation. Those who learn to organize useful service effectively place themselves in harmony with this principle. They become builders rather than extractors. They design systems that benefit others while also benefiting themselves. And over time, the rewards of that approach multiply. The lesson may be simple, but its implications reach far. Prosperity is not merely the accumulation of wealth. It is the result of organized effort directed toward solving problems and improving lives. Every product delivered, every service performed, every innovation introduced becomes part of a larger exchange. And in that exchange, value flows toward those who create it most effectively. The law of economics quietly keeps the score. It observes every transaction, every contribution, every imbalance. And while individuals may ignore its presence for a time, its influence eventually becomes impossible to escape. Those who align themselves with its principles find opportunity waiting for them. Those who resist it discover that prosperity built without service cannot endure. This is the enduring truth beneath all systems of wealth. Contribution creates value. Organization multiplies that value. Useful service transforms it into lasting prosperity. If success has patterns, failure has them too. Yet most people rarely stop long enough to examine them. When something goes wrong in life, the instinct is usually to blame circumstance. Bad timing, unfair competition, difficult conditions, unfortunate luck. Sometimes those explanations contain a measure of truth. Life is not a perfectly balanced game. and chance does play a role in many outcomes. But when the same kinds of setbacks repeat themselves again and again across different lives in different industries and in different generations, something else begins to appear. Failure often follows recognizable patterns. This realization can feel uncomfortable at first because it suggests that failure is not always mysterious or random. In many cases, it grows slowly from habits that are repeated day after day, decisions that are postponed, responsibilities that are avoided, or directions that were never clearly chosen in the first place. When those small patterns continue long enough, they shape the results people experience. Look closely at individuals who struggle repeatedly to move forward, and you often find that their difficulties are not caused by a single dramatic mistake. Instead, there is a gradual drift, a lack of clear direction guiding their actions. Without a definite purpose, effort becomes scattered. Energy flows into many activities but produces little lasting progress. Purpose acts like a compass. When it is present, decisions become easier. Priorities become clearer. Time begins to organize itself around meaningful goals. But when purpose is absent, life begins to resemble a journey without a map. People move constantly, yet they rarely feel as though they are getting anywhere. This absence of purpose quietly shapes many failures. It is not that individuals lack talent or opportunity. Often, they simply never paused long enough to decide what they truly wanted to accomplish. Another familiar pattern appears in the habit of procrastination. Almost everyone has experienced the strange feeling of knowing something should be done while continuously postponing the moment of action. The task lingers at the edge of attention. Plans are made to address it tomorrow, next week, or when circumstances feel more favorable. Procrastination rarely announces itself as a major problem. It usually begins with small delays, but those delays accumulate. Days turn into months, opportunities fade, and the original intention slowly loses its urgency. Meanwhile, others who acted more quickly move forward. The difference between progress and stagnation sometimes lies not in intelligence or resources, but in the simple willingness to act before conditions appear perfect. Closely related to procrastination is the absence of persistence. Many people begin their ambitions with enthusiasm. The idea feels exciting, the plan seems promising, and the first steps are taken with energy. But when obstacles appear, as they inevitably do, the enthusiasm begins to weaken. The first setback raises doubts. The second introduces frustration. Eventually, the individual begins wondering whether the goal itself was realistic. Without persistence, dreams dissolve at this point. But those who continue studying the problem, adjusting their plans, and pushing forward often discover that the barrier they faced was temporary rather than permanent. Persistence does not eliminate obstacles, but it allows individuals to outlast them. Fear also appears repeatedly in the stories of unrealized ambitions. Fear of failure, fear of criticism, fear of uncertainty. These quiet anxieties can shape decisions in subtle ways. A person may avoid pursuing an opportunity because they imagine the embarrassment of not succeeding. They may hesitate to share ideas because they anticipate judgment from others. In this way, fear gradually narrows the range of possibilities they allow themselves to explore. Ironically, the attempt to avoid failure often produces the very stagnation they hope to escape. Another pattern emerges in something that rarely receives enough attention: the condition of the body itself. Health habits influence energy, concentration, and emotional balance. Poor sleep, poor nutrition, or neglect of physical well-being slowly erodes the capacity to think clearly and act consistently. When the body weakens, the mind often follows. Ambitions that once seemed achievable begin to feel overwhelming simply because the physical foundation supporting them has been neglected. The connection between health and success may not always appear dramatic, but over long periods of time it becomes significant. Associations with other people also play an extraordinary role in shaping outcomes. Human beings absorb attitudes and expectations from the environments they inhabit. When someone spends years surrounded by individuals who expect little from life, that atmosphere gradually influences their own standards. Conversations begin revolving around complaints rather than possibilities. Skepticism replaces curiosity. Ambition begins to feel unrealistic. But the opposite environment can produce entirely different results. Associating with people who are thoughtful, disciplined, and forward-looking tends to elevate expectations. Ideas circulate more freely. Encouragement appears where doubt once existed. In this sense, the people surrounding us become quiet architects of our thinking. Choosing associations carefully is therefore one of the most important decisions anyone can make. Indecision forms another familiar thread in the pattern of failure. Some individuals spend extraordinary amounts of time considering possibilities without ever committing themselves to a direction. They weigh options endlessly, waiting for absolute certainty before acting, but certainty rarely appears in advance. Most meaningful decisions involve incomplete information. Waiting indefinitely for perfect clarity often means waiting forever. Meanwhile, circumstances continue moving forward without them. Eventually, the opportunity that required a decision quietly disappears. Closely tied to indecision is the absence of discipline. Discipline does not necessarily mean rigid schedules or harsh self-control. It means the ability to direct one's behavior consistently toward chosen goals. It is the habit of following through, even when enthusiasm fluctuates. Without discipline, effort becomes irregular. Progress begins and stops unpredictably. Plans are made enthusiastically, but abandoned just as quickly. Over time, this inconsistency produces frustration. The individual begins feeling as though life itself is resisting their ambitions. Yet often the real obstacle was the absence of sustained focus. These patterns: lack of purpose, procrastination, lack of persistence, fear, neglect of health. Poor associations, indecision, and absence of discipline do not operate in isolation. They interact with one another. A person without a clear purpose may procrastinate because no task feels urgent. Procrastination then weakens persistence, since the individual never develops the habit of pushing through discomfort. Fear becomes stronger when discipline is absent. Poor associations reinforce doubts that already exist. Gradually, these influences form a cycle. The individual feels stuck but cannot easily identify the source of the stagnation. Breaking that cycle requires something many people avoid: honest self-analysis. Self-analysis is not the same as self-criticism. Its purpose is not to create guilt or regret. Instead, it functions more like an inventory taken by a careful business owner. A business owner periodically reviews resources, strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities. They examine operations honestly so improvements can be made. Personal progress requires the same kind of reflection. From time to time, individuals must pause and ask themselves questions that reveal the patterns shaping their lives. Am I moving toward a definite purpose or drifting from one activity to another? Do I act promptly on important decisions, or do I postpone them until circumstances remove the opportunity entirely? When obstacles appear, do I persist until I understand how to overcome them, or do I quietly abandon the effort? Are my habits strengthening my health and energy, or weakening them? Are the people around me encouraging growth or reinforcing doubt? These questions are not comfortable, but they are powerful. They illuminate patterns that otherwise remain hidden. Many successful individuals develop the habit of conducting this kind of personal inventory regularly. Some do it at the end of each year. Others reflect monthly or even weekly. They examine their decisions, their actions, and their progress with a calm but honest perspective. Where mistakes appear, they study them without defensiveness. Where improvement is possible, they adjust their behavior. In this way, self-analysis becomes a tool for growth rather than a source of discouragement. Over time, this practice produces a remarkable effect. The individual becomes more aware of their own tendencies. They recognize the early signs of procrastination before it spreads. They notice when fear begins influencing their choices. They identify associations that drain their enthusiasm. With that awareness comes the ability to correct direction before small problems become large ones. Self-analysis also reveals something encouraging. The same patterns that lead to failure can be replaced with patterns that lead to success. Purpose can be defined. Procrastination can be replaced with decisive action. Persistence can be cultivated through deliberate practice. Health habits can be improved. Associations can be chosen more carefully. Discipline can be strengthened through consistent routines. Each adjustment may seem modest at first, but together they reshape the trajectory of a life. Just as repeated habits once created stagnation, New habits gradually produce progress, and the individual who once felt trapped by circumstance begins to discover that many of the forces shaping their future are within their influence after all. Failure, when studied honestly, becomes less mysterious. It reveals its patterns, and once those patterns are understood, they lose much of their power. Because awareness is the first step toward change, and change applied patiently, consistently, and with clear purpose can transform even the most discouraging patterns into the beginning of a different story. There are moments in every life when the path forward seems uncertain. The options are not perfectly clear. The future does not arrive with instructions, yet something inside quietly asks for a decision. In those moments, the difference between progress and stagnation often depends on a single quality that history repeatedly highlights: the ability to decide. Decision is one of the most powerful habits a person can develop, yet it is also one of the rarest. Many people spend large portions of their lives waiting for conditions to become ideal before committing themselves to action. They gather opinions, collect advice, and weigh possibilities again and again. The intention is understandable. No one wants to make a mistake. But the search for perfect certainty often becomes a quiet trap. Time continues moving forward while the individual remains suspended in hesitation. Opportunities rarely remain available forever. They appear, invite response, and then slowly fade if no action follows. By the time the hesitant person feels ready, the moment that required courage has already passed. Those who achieve remarkable things tend to approach decisions differently. They do not act recklessly, but once they understand their purpose and the direction they wish to pursue, they choose their course with clarity. And once chosen, they rarely allow outside opinions to shake that decision easily. This is why it has often been observed that successful individuals make decisions quickly and change them slowly. Failure, on the other hand, often grows from the opposite pattern: decisions made slowly and changed frequently. When people hesitate too long, they begin inviting more and more voices into their thinking. Each new opinion introduces another layer of doubt. Advice, even when well-intentioned, can scatter focus if it is accepted indiscriminately. The mind begins shifting direction repeatedly. Plans are abandoned before they have time to succeed. Goals dissolve under the weight of uncertainty. Eventually, the individual may feel as though life itself is unstable, when in reality it was the absence of firm decision that created the instability. History offers powerful illustrations of what happens when individuals choose decisiveness instead of hesitation. One of the most dramatic examples appeared during the early days of the American struggle for independence. At that time, the idea of breaking away from one of the most powerful empires in the world seemed almost impossible. Many colonists feared the consequences. Some hoped compromise might avoid conflict. Others doubted whether independence could ever succeed. Yet within that atmosphere of uncertainty, a group of men made a decision that would reshape the future of a nation. They gathered in a modest hall in Philadelphia, aware that the choice before them carried enormous risk. If their rebellion failed, they would likely face charges of treason. The penalty for such an act was not mild, it was death. Despite those dangers, they signed their names to a declaration that openly challenged the authority of the British Crown. It was not a cautious gesture. It was a bold, irreversible commitment. In doing so, they demonstrated something extraordinary. They chose a definite course even though the outcome remained uncertain. Their decision did not guarantee victory. The war that followed would test the endurance of the colonies in ways few could have predicted. Resources were scarce. Military strength was limited. The struggle stretched over years, filled with hardship and sacrifice. But the decision itself changed the direction of history. Once those signatures appeared on the document, hesitation no longer had a place in the movement. The path had been chosen. Action followed. The leaders of that revolution faced criticism, doubt, and enormous obstacles. Yet their determination rarely wavered once the decision had been made. The lesson hidden within that moment remains relevant far beyond politics or war. Progress often begins when individuals commit themselves fully to a direction that others may still question. Another powerful illustration of decisive leadership can be found in the life of Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln's early years were filled with setbacks that might have discouraged a less determined person. He faced financial difficulties, political defeats, and personal hardships that would have convinced many people to abandon their ambitions entirely. Yet Lincoln possessed an unusual ability to hold firmly to his convictions once he had reached them. During the darkest years of the American Civil War, his leadership was tested repeatedly. Advisors disagreed about strategy. Critics questioned his decisions. Political pressure surrounded him from all sides. But Lincoln understood something essential about leadership in moments of crisis. Once a careful decision had been made, the nation needed steadiness rather than constant reversal. He listened to advice. He considered different perspectives, yet he refused to allow endless debate to paralyze action. This balance between thoughtful consideration and firm decision allowed him to guide the country through one of the most difficult periods in its history. The pattern repeats itself across countless fields. Inventors who transform industries, entrepreneurs who build companies, reformers who challenge social norms, many of them share the same habit. They decide. They choose a direction. And once that direction is chosen, they guard it carefully against the noise of doubt that surrounds every ambitious idea. It does not mean they ignore information or refuse to learn, but they refuse to allow indecision to become their permanent state of mind. There is another subtle danger hidden in the opinions of others. When individuals reveal their plans too freely, they often invite skepticism from people who cannot yet imagine the outcome. Friends, relatives, and acquaintances may respond with caution, not because they intend harm, but because they themselves feel uncertain. Yet repeated exposure to such doubt can weaken confidence. Gradually, the person begins adjusting their plans to match the expectations of others rather than the vision they originally held. This is why many successful individuals develop the habit of speaking little about their plans until those plans are already moving forward. They understand that ideas are fragile in their early stages. Excessive discussion can expose them to criticism before they have grown strong enough to withstand it. By protecting their decisions from unnecessary interference, they preserve the energy required to turn ideas into reality. But decision alone is never enough. A clear decision may set a journey in motion, yet the path ahead almost always includes resistance. Obstacles appear. Critics emerge. Results may take longer than expected. This is where another essential quality begins to reveal its importance: persistence. Persistence is the ability to continue moving forward after the excitement of the initial decision has faded. It is the quiet discipline of continuing the effort even when progress seems slow or uncertain. Many people experience the thrill of a new idea. They imagine the possibilities vividly. They speak about their ambitions with enthusiasm. But when the first difficulties appear, that enthusiasm often disappears. The idea is quietly abandoned, replaced by another possibility that feels easier or more promising. Those who eventually succeed rarely follow that pattern. They expect resistance. They understand that meaningful achievements rarely arrive quickly. And so they develop the habit of persistence, returning to the work day after day, adjusting their approach when necessary, but refusing to abandon the goal itself. The story of Fannie Hurst provides a vivid illustration of this quality. Before becoming one of the most widely read authors of her time, Hurst encountered rejection on a scale that would have discouraged nearly anyone. Her early manuscripts were returned again and again by publishers who believed her writing would never attract a large audience. Letter after letter arrived with the same discouraging message. For many aspiring writers, such a response might have ended the dream entirely. But Hurst possessed a different relationship with rejection. Instead of interpreting each refusal as proof that her talent was insufficient, she treated it as part of the process. She continued writing. She continued submitting her work. The rejections accumulated in astonishing numbers. Dozens of manuscripts returned, then dozens more. Yet she persisted. Eventually, her determination began to produce results. Editors who had once overlooked her work began recognizing its appeal. Publications followed. Success arrived gradually but unmistakably. At the height of her career, Fannie Hurst became one of the most popular writers in America, her stories reaching millions of readers. What changed between the early rejections and the later success? Her persistence. The ability to continue when others would have stopped transformed a long series of disappointments into the foundation of a remarkable career. Similar stories appear across nearly every profession. Inventors test prototypes that fail repeatedly before discovering the design that works. Entrepreneurs launch ventures that struggle before finding the model that succeeds. Artists face criticism before their style is recognized. Each of these journeys contains the same underlying pattern. Decision initiates the journey. Persistence carries it forward. Without decision, nothing begins. Without persistence, nothing continues. Together, they create momentum strong enough to overcome the many obstacles that appear along the way. The world often celebrates the final success without noticing the long period of persistence that made it possible. Yet those quiet years of effort are usually where the real transformation occurs. During that time, individuals develop resilience. They refine their skills. They deepen their understanding of the challenges they face. What once seemed impossible gradually becomes manageable. And when success finally arrives, it often appears sudden to those who did not witness the long preparation behind it. The stories of decisive leaders and persistent creators remind us of something important. History rarely belongs to those who wait endlessly for perfect conditions. It belongs to those who decide and then persist long enough to see their decisions through. The world may resist them at first. Critics may doubt them. Circumstances may test their patience. But when decision and persistence work together, they create a force capable of shaping events far beyond what hesitation alone could ever achieve. There is a principle that quietly appears again and again behind the greatest achievements in business science and human progress. It does not always attract attention because it operates beneath the surface of visible success. When people look at a powerful industrialist, a famous inventor, or a visionary entrepreneur, they often imagine a single brilliant mind standing alone at the center of the story. Yet when the full history is examined more carefully, another pattern emerges. Great accomplishments are rarely the product of one mind working in isolation. They are far more often the result of many minds working together in harmony. This idea is sometimes described as the mastermind principle. The principle itself is simple to explain but profound in its consequences. When two or more people coordinate their knowledge, experience, and imagination toward a definite purpose, and when they do so in a spirit of genuine cooperation, the combined power of their thinking becomes greater than the sum of their individual efforts. Something new appears in that union. Ideas that might never have occurred to one person alone begin to form naturally when perspectives intersect. Questions asked by one mind stimulate insights in another. Experiences gathered in different fields begin connecting in unexpected ways. The result is not merely cooperation. It is the creation of a new level of creative energy. To understand the mastermind principle fully, it helps to look at it from two different perspectives. The first is economic. No individual, no matter how intelligent or determined, possesses all the knowledge required to build a great enterprise alone. Modern industries involve countless specialized skills: engineering, finance management, marketing, logistics, and more. Even the most brilliant leader cannot master every field at once. What successful individuals often do instead is something far more effective. They gather around them a group of people whose abilities complement one another. Each person contributes knowledge from their own domain. Each person strengthens the thinking of the others. Together, they form a coordinated system of intelligence. Andrew Carnegie offers one of the clearest examples of this principle in action. Carnegie became known as one of the most powerful industrial figures of his era, building an enormous steel empire that transformed American industry. But Carnegie himself often spoke openly about the fact that his success was not the result of solitary genius. He surrounded himself with individuals who possessed expertise far beyond his own in specific areas. Engineers who understood the technical complexities of steel production. Managers capable of organizing large operations. Financial thinkers who could structure investments and expansions. Each of these individuals contributed ideas that strengthened the enterprise as a whole. Carnegie's real talent was not simply making decisions. It was recognizing the importance of gathering powerful minds and coordinating their efforts around a shared purpose. This is the economic side of the mastermind principle. The combined knowledge of several individuals can solve problems faster and more effectively than any single mind attempting to carry the burden alone. But there is also a second dimension to this principle, one that is psychological. When individuals work together in harmony, something happens within the atmosphere of their collaboration. Encouragement spreads from one person to another. Confidence grows. Creative thinking accelerates. Each participant begins to feel supported by the energy of the group. It is almost as if an invisible current forms between the minds involved. That current fuels imagination and persistence. This is why groups functioning under the mastermind principle often generate ideas that none of the participants expected at the beginning. The conversation itself becomes creative. A thought offered casually by one person sparks a new possibility in another. That possibility then evolves as the discussion continues. Soon the group finds itself exploring solutions that seemed impossible when each person first entered the room. Henry Ford's story provides another fascinating example of how this dynamic works. Ford is often remembered as the architect of the modern automobile industry. Yet Ford himself never claimed to possess all the technical knowledge required to design and produce automobiles at the scale he envisioned. Instead, he built relationships with engineers, inventors, and thinkers who brought different kinds of expertise into the enterprise. Some understood mechanical design. Others specialized in production systems. Still others contributed insights about business organization and efficiency. Ford's genius lay partly in his ability to coordinate these minds around a clear objective to create automobiles affordable enough for ordinary families. Through discussion, experimentation, and shared effort, the group gradually refined ideas that eventually transformed manufacturing itself. The famous assembly line was not the inspiration of a single isolated thinker. It emerged from the collaborative environment Ford created, where multiple minds examined the same challenge from different perspectives. This cooperative atmosphere multiplied creative energy, and that energy produced results powerful enough to reshape an entire industry. The mastermind principle therefore operates on two levels simultaneously. On the practical level, it combines specialized knowledge from multiple individuals. On the psychological level, it generates enthusiasm, confidence, and imagination that strengthen the entire group. Together, these forces create momentum. And momentum is often the invisible factor behind great achievements. Many ambitious projects fail not because the idea itself is impossible, but because the individual attempting it eventually becomes discouraged. Working alone can magnify doubt. When setbacks appear, there may be no one available to offer encouragement or suggest alternative approaches. Gradually, the individual begins questioning their own judgment. Energy fades. But when people operate within a supportive mastermind alliance, setbacks are experienced differently. Instead of becoming discouraging, they become problems to solve collectively. Someone offers a new idea. Another suggests a different strategy. A third person contributes knowledge drawn from previous experience. The obstacle that once seemed overwhelming begins to shrink under the combined attention of several minds. This is why many of the most effective leaders deliberately cultivate relationships with thoughtful collaborators. They recognize that isolation weakens progress while cooperation strengthens it. The mastermind principle also explains why certain environments seem to produce extraordinary creativity. When talented individuals gather in places where ideas are exchanged freely, innovation accelerates. Universities, research laboratories, entrepreneurial communities, and creative studios often become centers of discovery precisely because they bring many active minds into close interaction. Each conversation becomes a potential spark. Each exchange of ideas strengthens the network of thinking. Over time, the entire environment becomes charged with creative energy. Individuals working within that atmosphere often produce insights far beyond what they might have discovered alone. Another important feature of the mastermind principle is harmony. For the combined power of multiple minds to emerge, the participants must genuinely cooperate with one another. If rivalry, jealousy, or resentment dominate the environment, the principle breaks down. Ideas stop flowing. Participants become defensive rather than creative. The group begins protecting individual opinions instead of exploring better solutions. Harmony therefore acts as the essential condition that allows the mastermind principle to function. When mutual respect exists, people feel safe sharing ideas without fear of ridicule. They listen to one another with curiosity instead of hostility. The atmosphere becomes constructive rather than competitive. Under those conditions, the collective intelligence of the group begins to expand rapidly. Each participant benefits from the strengths of the others, and the group as a whole becomes capable of solving problems that would overwhelm any individual member. It is fascinating to consider how many of the innovations shaping modern civilization have emerged through this process. Technological breakthroughs, scientific discoveries, major enterprises, and even social movements often began as collaborative efforts among small groups of individuals who shared ideas freely. Their discussions generated momentum that eventually spread outward into the wider world. The mastermind principle therefore represents far more than a strategy for business success. It reveals something fundamental about human progress itself. The greatest advances rarely arise from isolated effort. They emerge when people combine their thinking, their experience, and their imagination toward a shared purpose. When that combination occurs under conditions of trust and cooperation, a remarkable transformation takes place. The energy of individual minds merges into something larger, and from that union comes the power to achieve goals that once seemed beyond reach. In the end, achievement rarely arrives by accident. It grows from clear plans, the courage to decide, the patience to persist, and the wisdom to work with others whose minds strengthen our own. Every great story of success begins with a person who chose a direction and kept moving toward it. Perhaps the real question now is simple. What direction will you choose next? And if these ideas helped you think a little differently, feel free to support the journey here so more conversations like this can continue.